What's the deal with cortisol? Hi, if you're new to this channel, I'm Slick Nick, your personal keto bro. I have a master's in bro science, so you know what that means. I'm not a real doctor, not a dietitian, not a nutritionist, not a personal trainer. I'm just some dude in Tennessee that has a camera and 10,000 subscribers. And I'm acknowledging that I'm just experimenting on myself with this whole keto thing. So you get to be entertained by it. You can gain insight from it. You can become further convinced you would never want to do keto yourself based on what you see here. But this is something I'm doing as I am approaching age 40, 2.5 months from now, as I'm having my goal of 17% body fat. So let's talk about cortisol because it's very important. This is my research. I have watched Fat Fiction. There's several YouTubers that I have so much respect for. Autumn Bates, we've got Dr. Berg, and we've got Thomas DeLauer, plus Fat Fiction, which is a documentary on Amazon Prime. So cortisol, this keeps popping up. And so it's interesting because when you go full keto, as I have, you will, I am experiencing that fat loss, weight loss, is not simply based on calories in and out, staying less than 2,000 calories a day like I was doing, which was very beneficial. But now that I'm keto, we're all in the bro science. We're looking at the hormones involved. So I made a video talking about leptin, and I talked about ghrelin, I talked about those, but now it's time to talk about cortisol because there are the 5 pillars of being keto, which I created this concept, and you can check out the video right there and see my original video on it. But here's the pillars of being keto. Number 1, filling up on fat and fiber. Number 2, fasting. Number 3, where's my water jar? I don't have it with me. Drinking about 1 gallon of water a day. Number 4, walking 2 to 3 miles a day. And then lastly, 5, getting enough rest every night. For me, I want 7 hours, which I'm pretty successful at being able to do, that needs to be its own video. But cortisol, so what happens? People say, you need to do your research. People love to say that in the comments of YouTube videos. You should do your research, and then they'll have this big paragraph and links that I'm never gonna read because ultimately, this is my journey. I'm doing this for me, not for anybody else. I don't need anybody else to become keto. That means nothing to me. This is for me alone. I'm experimenting on myself. So when you Google cortisol, here's what it says. What does cortisol do to the body? Cortisol, the main stress hormone, whereas ghrelin we talked about is a hunger hormone. This is the stress hormone. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, increases sugars or glucose in the bloodstream, which is funny because what time is it? It's 1:35 at 1 o'clock every day. That's when I do this. I do my apple cider vinegar, which if you want to check out that video, it exists on this channel. But I do that about an hour before I eat. Why do I do that? I do that so that, as we're learning here, I do it so that I can better regulate the sugars in my bloodstream or the glucose levels. So cortisol, the primary stress hormone, increases sugars or glucose in the bloodstream and enhances your brain's use of glucose and increases the availability of substances that repair tissues. Cortisol also curbs functions that would be non-essential or detrimental in a fight or flight situation. Okay, so it's useful, it's there for a reason, this cortisol, but ultimately, if you're part of the keto cult, as I am, you know that also cortisol is what's responsible for belly fat. Yes, so you can do all the stuff right as far as, let's say you want keto, you're counting your calories every day, you're burning several hundred calories, you're doing everything right, and still there's belly fat right there. Why won't it go away? Well, if you're keto, then you perceive that cortisol, which is caused by stress, is keeping that fat there. Why? Why were we designed this way? Well, go back further than 100 years when people actually had legitimate concerns of starving all the time. That still is the case for people all across the world, but specifically for somebody like me in the United States, I'm not in a situation where I'm likely to starve anytime soon. But still, I have stress in my life, I guess. So my body is preparing, keeping that little inner tube of body fat for me, which is probably the main difference between me reaching my goal. I estimate I'm around 20% body fat. My goal this year is to get down to 17%. So that 3% is probably all right here in my stomach. Let's see, will that be in the shot? There we go. So there's my stomach. So there's fat there. So I'm trying to get rid of that. And so the concept is, how can we hack the system in a way that the cortisol will stop being produced so that I'm not storing any body fat based on stress? Well, and that goes back to the 5 pillars of being keto. So, well, for one, I guess the first pillar doesn't so much apply to the idea of fasting. Well, that's more about keeping the insulin, it's like a breaker switch, just keeping the insulin off so that I'm not storing fat. But in addition to that, what else is on my pillars here? So we got the filling up on the fat and the fiber. We got the fasting. We got 3 is water, drinking a gallon of water a day. But number 4 and 5 are really falling into this category of cortisol. So whereas the first 3 are about the insulin, the last 2 on my list are going, and by the way, the 5 pillars, you can check it out. There's a link right there that you can understand it better. I do a separate video on it. But the last 2 are about managing that cortisol. So we're talking about walking 2 to 3 miles a day is what I'm doing, and getting the 7 hours of sleep. So it's gonna maybe be different from everyone else, but for me, every day, in addition to my weight training, I'm at the gym for 45 minutes to an hour every morning, 6 days a week, but 7 days a week, every day. Even like today, it was snowing, and in the snow, I think I did 2.5 miles today. So it's somewhere for me usually between 2 miles and I'm sorry, between 2 and 3 miles a day, which for me is going to be somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes to do that. And I'm walking, and let me try to demonstrate how that is. It's more of like a speed walk situation. Twice during kind of the middle of it, I'll do this. I'll be running, but just a short amount. Here's the concept. See, imagine for me, again, I'm approaching age 40. Well, when I turned 15, I started running. That was something I started doing. And so I've ran most of my life. I've been running since like 1996. But it didn't help me lose fat. And all these years later, now I understand it. Because if you're running regularly, it can actually cause you to produce more cortisol, which, as we know, stores belly fat specifically. So that's why you're going to notice that people who do keto aren't really big into running, because they have learned through experience that walking every day helps attack or manage that cortisol so that you are not building extra belly fat here. You're managing that cortisol. So ultimately, that's what it comes down to as far as being keto. We're ultimately battling insulin and cortisol. So again, in review, here's how it works. Number 1 is filling up on fat and fiber. We're not allowing that insulin to really rise much at all, especially because of number 2, intermittent fasting, pushing our consumption of protein even till the afternoon. I mean, for me, it's 1:41. I'm finally going to break my fast at 2 o'clock, but it's taken that long in the day for me to do it. Number 3 is drinking a gallon of water a day, which is just better to help regulate all the food going through there and making sure I'm hydrated through the fasting. But those last 2, walking 2 or 3 miles a day and getting 7 hours of sleep for me, those things are going to manage the cortisol. So let me talk about sleeping real quick, and then we're out of here for this video. So if you do not get the rest that you need, it's going to be very hard for you to burn the fat, because cortisol is going to get involved. If not getting enough sleep is basically like a high stress situation. Your body needs a rest. So I'll make a separate video on it, but I have some things that I do as I'm getting ready for bed to ensure that I am going to get a good night's rest. Thanks for watching. Your comments belong right here.